And one of the things I'm going to turn back now to that whole international thing. One of the things I picked up on was that one of the biggest economies in the world has been also selling bonds. And of course, that's China. Now, I have this pictorial that a friend of mine posted on Facebook. Thank you, Larry. And what this shows is for 2022, despite all of the talk of global inflation and downturns across the world, 2022 is going to be the first year that if you add up all the GDPs around the world, that it is greater than $100 trillion. And this is a really nice picture that my friend posted. And it shows the United States is going to have an economy coming in about 25.3 trillion. China's behind us at 19.9 trillion. You can see some other names like India, 3.3 trillion, Japan, 4.9 trillion, Germany, 4.3 trillion, the UK, 3.4 trillion, Russia, 1.8 trillion, and some of the other economies out there. But the big players, of course, are the United States and China. And you can see here a little footnote. China's GDP is projected to surpass that of the US in 2030. And this little footnote over here, the US has been the world's largest economy since 1871. So if you think about that, 1871, about what is that, 130, no,
Wow.
140, 100 and, well, I'm not even counting right. 170, 160 to 170 years later, it might be that the United States is no longer the number one player in the world, right? And so China is getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year. And it's China that has been pulling out of the US economy. Now, if you back up to when we were doing the show in January and you looked at the different countries that owned US savings bonds and US Treasury bonds, you would see that Japan and China were neck and neck as the biggest owners of US debt. They buy our bonds in order to put their currency more in stable because the US has traditionally been the stable place to put your excess dollars, right? So Japan has always, since the 1980s, had a ton of money invested in US debt. And China, since about the mid 2000s, 2005, 6, 7, started to pump money till they, were equal, if not surpassing Japan, and each one of them owns about 1.5 trillion. And we've been talking about the Fed writing off about 9 trillion. So if you think about it, Japan and China combined, that's a big chunk, right? And what we found out this month is that since about February and March, I don't know if it's coincidence that it has to do with the invasion of the Ukraine and the more importantly, the US's response, or the US and the Western world's response of putting sanctions on Russia and making it so that they couldn't do their trading on the Swift exchange and all of that good stuff. China has pulled out $500 billion from US debt. So some of the theories are that China is investing in themselves, kind of like a company does a stock buyback to increase their value in the overall market. Well, China may be taking that money out of US debt and now investing it in the yuan, which is now more stable than ever. Or it could be that China has some issues and they need some of that money to bail themselves out. We've been hearing about China having some real estate issues in their, domestic economy and things like that. Some bubbles have been bursting over there. And also maybe the pandemic. They've been a little bit more militant about controlling the pandemic, which has been affecting GDP. So but my theory is that it's just all too canny that the money has been coming out since about the time of the Russian invasion and the U.S. and Western world response. I think it's more political in that China is a little bit unhappy with the response of the Western world to how they quickly cut Russia off from being able to do anything in the world. And as you know, China has had its eyes perhaps on reacquiring Taiwan and things like that. And they've been going back on the deal that they had with When Hong Kong became back part of China, the deal was that they wouldn't touch the Hong Kong economy for 50 years. It's only been like 10 something years, and they're already kind of messing with the Hong Kong infrastructure. So there's a lot of eyes on what China's going to do next. And China's probably saying to themselves, listen, I'm going to make sure that I tell the world economically versus militaristically what I think about how it's treating other companies, how it's countries, how it's ganging up on it. So my idea is the reason why a third of their holdings came out of the U.S. in the last 6 months has a lot to do with kind of a political statement.